Hey everyone, it's Dr. Eric, the fitness physician, with another awesome episode of the Relentless Vitality Podcast. Super excited to have a cool guest on my show. Been looking forward to meeting him for a little while. Mr. Alec, is it Kikel? How do you say your last name?
Kikel.
Kikel. And anyway, he's been making the tour, making some waves. He's a super smart guy, very knowledgeable in this space about peptides. We're going to talk about quantum biology. We're going to talk about all kinds of cool stuff. Alex, welcome to the show, my man.
Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate that. And it is cool that I get to like talk with doctors like you. Cause again, I'm not a doctor. I don't have my PhD. And it's just cool how everyone like in today's society, I feel like the majority of people are just trying to learn. Everyone's trying to learn. Doesn't matter your background, degree, whatever. Like everyone's just trying to learn, which is cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we were talking offline about like knowledge is power and like we're all learning and everybody should be learning. And unfortunately some people get dogmatic and like this is only my way. And it's like you got to be open minded about stuff. And you and I are both on the same page about that. So everybody who's listening, just listen up and just soak it up. And no matter who you listen to, just learn something from it. Try it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, everybody's an N of one, right? So
That's exactly right. I've seen too many like quote unquote miracles happen that I just stopped shutting my mind off to things
yeah,
because something as simple as grounding and walking outside should be impactful, but not crazy impactful. And yet I've seen it completely transform people's lives.
yeah,
Same thing with peptide X or pharmaceutical A, where they should on paper help, but they shouldn't be completely life transforming in
right.
a couple days time. And yet you see it happen. So
Yeah.
something's obviously going on. Let's put all the tools into one toolbox and use what we need at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So for those who don't know you, Alex, if you don't mind giving a quick 30-second spiel about like how'd you get into the space? How'd you get involved and get so knowledgeable about all this stuff from your background? Tell us a little bit about that and what you're doing now.
So originally played lacrosse in high school, was going to go for a scholarship to college, got a concussion, couldn't walk, couldn't do anything for 6 months, had to recover out of that. That
Mm.
kind of pushed me into like nutrition dietetics. Didn't really like that, but ended up getting my master's in performance enhancement injury prevention. Was going to go for my PhD, but at the time I was posting on the good old bodybuilding.com forums back in the day when they were like thriving, like everyone was on there.
Yeah, yeah.
And business took off. People were throwing money my way. I had success early on in the bodybuilding community, then powerlifting strongman, then started reversing some health problems, then NBA, NFL, yeah, NFL first, then NHL, and it just kind of blew up from there. So now I kind of say that I fix biology because I can't think of any other way to describe it. I got an amazing wife, 4 kids, 4 dogs, and live my dream every day. So that's kind of a synopsis of me in 30 seconds.
That's awesome, man. That's beautiful. 4 dogs
But
too.
now,
All right. No
yeah,
cat.
oh, they're the best. No, no cats. So my middle son Aiden loves cats, but my
Yeah.
wife is pretty allergic to them. So we're
Uh,
like, maybe when he's older.
yeah, not having, not having. Cool, man. So for all my listeners, everybody knows the stuff I talk about. Alex, I love Alex because he talks about some of the same stuff I do and then some. So I always like to start with like some of I know everybody like wants to hear about the cool new peptide or whatever nutraceutical, which we will definitely get there. But I always like with my patients, I always start with like the free stuff, the easy stuff, the lifestyle stuff, like grounding, getting out in the sun every day, optimizing your circadian rhythm, fasting, timing your nutrient cycles, nutrient partitioning, stuff like that. So most of my people and my listeners are interested in like, of course, a lot of different things, hormone optimization, overall health, but always talk about like body composition, recomposition, fat loss for the women and fat loss, recomp, building muscle for the men. So I always like to frame things around that. That's why I kind of focus on like my thing is like muscle medicine, like muscle as the organ of longevity, because all the myokines it makes and all the things it does for your body. So many people are like fast, lose weight, lose weight. I'm like I try to be contrary. I'm like build your body up, build muscle, build your metabolism. Let's do it, and then the rest will kind of fall into place. That's kind of my perspective. So anyway, so yeah, so let's talk about that. Like let's talk a little bit about like if you want, I mean, take it wherever you want to. Like I'd love to talk and get your take on like energetics, like we were talking about circadian rhythms. I definitely want to talk about like some nutrition stuff because I know you've talked before about like balancing out parasympathetic, sympathetic. I want to get into like fasting, coming out of fasting to use that just the tools without getting into the expensive compounds. How can we optimize our energy, our mind, our body composition, that kind of stuff? But take it wherever you want to. We'll weave back around later.
I like that you said that too about where you're coming at from the longevity aspect because my recent goal, I got my biological testing age back. So I'm 32 and a half or something, and my biological age is 28 or so.
Nice.
So my goal though is to have the lowest biological age, the lowest speed of aging, but also the highest amount of muscle tissue. That's my goal. And I don't know what kind of ratio equation we can put that into, but my goal is to be the best out there with that. Because I agree with you. I feel like the longevity community, although fasting is amazing, has so many benefits, we have chemicals, compounds, and other things that can drive that in a fed state. That's not to say don't fast, but I think we have a little more emphasis on building lean tissue and having better practices, more than just the peptides, but the training, the nutrition, the breathing practices, and things like that. So let's actually start there. One that probably no one thinks about because you don't talk about it in this kind of setting, but I like you kind of want us to go down that route, nasal breathing. Mm-hmm. So throughout the majority of your day, nasal breathing. When you're training, nasal breathing. If you're doing high intensity, like really far end spectrum glycolysis, blow your lungs out hypoxia work, you're going to mouth breathe like you're kind of supposed to do that. But why do we want to nasal breathe the majority of the day? When you breathe properly through your nose, it's hitting the lower portion of your lungs, it's activating it. It's driving up more hemodynamic flow to your lungs, which drives up more oxygenation to the rest of the body. So we're improving carbon dioxide tolerance to improve oxygen handling. What that does, because anyone who's basically taken any kind of biology class or anything in the physiology world in school remembers that we're essentially, to lose fat, we're just breaking off chains of carbon. So you're exhaling those fats as carbons. So you get better at handling carbon dioxide. You get more efficient in handling oxygen. You get better at just liberating fat from adipocytes, dumping into the bloodstream, and then driving beta oxidation in the mitochondria. So by simply nasal breathing, it keeps you more parasympathetic, and it keeps you more focused on that PBO system. I made that term up, by the way, so it's parasympathetic beta oxidative system, because there's no terminology out there to describe the energy system you're using for 20 hours a day. We talk about sympathetic, parasympathetic, but what's fueling your need? So throughout the day of this conversation, we're pretty low heart rate, low ventilation. I'm pretty excited, so I got some dopamine fluxing, but it's mainly that PBO system. So if you get good at nasal breathing and good at handling that parasympathetic beta oxidative system, you get better at utilizing stored body fat as fuel. Because that's the whole point. I would rather have the fuel coming in, going straight to glycogen storage, nitrogen storage, and maybe some triacylglycerol and myocytes, and then actually have us pull into stored adipocytes in our body and liberate that fat for fuel for the day. That's kind of the best scenario, and that's how you can reclaim. Literally just by starting off with breathing. I think that's like the easiest low-hanging fruit.
I love that. Yeah, because I've talked, I tell people about that, like using the Bolt score and extended breath hold walk stuff. I love that. So, and it's free, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, perfect. I'm glad you brought that up.
So then we go from there. So now you have some carbon dioxide tolerance, or handling oxygen better. You have your breathing down. Now let's look at overall inflammatory states. So if you're in a higher state of inflammation, let's say higher HSCRP, like even like 2+, you start to run into problems. Interleukin 6, maybe in the 12+ range. You're in an inflammatory mess. Health markers aren't good. You feel more fluid retentive. If you're in that high state of inflammation all the time, adipocytes, your fat cells, get inflamed. When they're inflamed, have a high amount of inflammation, what goes down? Lipase activity. So now your fat cells become resistant to liberation. So you're not only not able to lose fat, but you're storing more fluid because of the inflammation. So if we're trying to bring down those states of inflammation, it goes back to our good old friend grounding. What grounding does is just electron donation. So the earth is giving off those negative ion emissions, just like when we eat fruit, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. That's just electron donation. So instead of eating your fruit, which is still awesome, you can also just ground outside more electron donation, and you're also having the bottom of your feet, there's these massive pores. It'll suck out inflammatory proteins, pathogens. I hate saying the word toxins, but it's in that same category. It'll start pulling that stuff out to the bottom of your feet. 5 minutes a day. Ideally, more is better. Like the ideal numbers of sun exposure and grounding is kind of impossible in today's society, unless you live on the equator and you're working outside. It's like 6 to 8 hours. Like in the best scenario, even a couple of minutes can be massively beneficial, because we're just trying to change that electron donation equation to pull down inflammatory states. So going back to just pulling down inflammation in order to lose fat better.
Love it. Love it. Fantastic. Yeah, I agree. Even like you said, 5 minutes a day, I try to do that every day. And the more, the better, especially if it rains. And then in the summer, it's hot. That water makes it more conductive, right? So go stay in that wet grass. It may be squishy, but it's going to help.
It's funny. So all the old things that were made fun of, like they say, you say the tree huggers, right?
Yeah.
So if you hug a tree, it's that conductive lightning rod. So you get more electron donation. So if you ever see someone outside hugging a tree like me, I'm just trying to get more electron donation in less time. Like that's a real thing, and people made fun of hippies for that. They're like, oh, the tree huggers. Like, yeah, they were kind of smarter than all of us,
I know, right? Well, it's kind of like the Japanese, was it Shinrin Roku, the forest bathing, going through the sun, you're still absorbing all that light, the UV rays, the infrared reflecting through the green. I'm like, wow, into that, they were pretty smart.
Right? Oh, so it's crazy too, because the mitochondria will hold on to that infrared exposure. And then if you do like cold therapy, sauna therapy, anything to cause that spontaneous like vibration and shake, almost actually not really like how a microwave works, so that's more hydrogen bonds, but think about it more from the mitochondrial level. You're releasing that mitochondria locally. So if you get that sun exposure, you're holding on to it, coming back inside, and then releasing it later on. So whenever you do your cold therapies, your saunas, things like that, that's one of the mechanisms by which they drive a lot of healing. It's just releasing of that infrared light exposure.
Love it. Love it. That's awesome. Cool. Um, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm a big fan of cold therapy, infrared, sauna, all the above. I know you're big on that too. You got like a Mac Daddy red light gym or something, don't you? Or something?
It's cool. Yeah. So we have red lights above, and then we have a couple of the EMR Tech actual panels with near infrared and the red light. So we'll have that on the entire time. And I honestly, so a couple things there because we're just talking about it. Might as well. One of the biggest players is just the reduction in blue light driving that sympathetic activity. If you're in a basement, because that's where our home gym's at, the basement, those lights, they just drain your sympathetic nervous system. So you're wasting so much more ATP per square second you're down there because of the overexpression. So if we're just pulling that down, you're more parasympathetic, and you can be sympathetic during the active training sets, but whenever you're resting, that's all PBO. That's all that parasympathetic oxidative system. So we're pulling down on just being overly sympathetic for no reason. We don't want to waste energy. We want to have a low state of arousal in the gym, right? And be focused. So it pulls that down. Then we have the weakening of adipocytes. All the near infrared exposure will actually weaken adipocytes, so they'll dump out more free fatty acids into the bloodstream. So now you're starting to fuel your workouts and get leaner from those workouts because you're always in this red near infrared environment. And then you just go to basic tissue temperature. Like you will always have a better workout if you're warmer than when you're colder. For the most part, unless you're looking at cold therapies with aerobic work and more fat loss, but this is more weight training, hypertrophy, strength work. So we love it down there. It's absolutely awesome. We actually have a clear light sauna coming in, and their far infrared spectrum will hit the same resonance as an endogenous water molecule. So it will spontaneously erupt and blow up, and the water molecule will release all of its endogenous toxins. So if there's the mycotoxin, like anything in there, that infrared range is going to basically cause it to shake and just kind of explode, which is really cool. I'm excited for it.
Interesting. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's cool. I have an older infrared sauna down my bay, and I tend to do it after my workout to kind of keep that it's almost like you're extending your workout, and then you're detoxing all that stuff. I read somewhere it was like there's a couple ladies that they're big, their whole podcast is all about quantum biology, but and you might know about this. I was going to look up the data because I couldn't remember off the top of my head. I could have swore she had said something about like not combining them, like you putting like your red light in your sauna at the same time, just because of the different effects on it, or doing them separately. I can't remember. Are you familiar with anything like that? This is kind of off topic, but
Say that again. What
like
are they
not
saying?
something about like how you should not do red light and sauna like an infrared at the same time. Like people that put their red lights in their sauna or next to them, or so they're doing both at the same time. I'm like, and there was a reason for it, why she said, but I can't remember. I'm gonna have to go look it up. But I didn't know if you were aware of anything.
Yeah. I'd like to know why, because if you're looking at so she's saying red, not near infrared, correct? Or is she saying both?
Right. So like if you had like just like a red light panel like this and putting and then
Okay.
going in your infrared sauna and doing them both at the same time. I don't know why. I don't remember. I'm gonna have to go look it up, but I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, we're looking at nanometers and depth of penetration.
Yeah.
So on the red spectrum, that's more superficial, that's more dermal changes. So to me, you're not getting a lot of actual healing mitochondrial interactions or anything at that subquantum level. I mean, obviously everything's affecting that subquantum level, but that red range, nanometer wise, isn't doing too much besides topical changes.
Right.
Whereas the near infrared, that's penetrating, that's actually vibrating those water molecules and causing all the mitochondrial changes as well. So I can't think of a reason why, but I'd like to know why.
Yeah, me too. I'll go back and look it up, see if I can find it. But cool. Okay, so we talked about light, we talked about grounding, talked about breath work, other free stuff. Since we talked on it, I definitely want to get into like people always ask about. I mean, definitely we'll talk about like nutrition and training too, because I definitely want to get your perspective on like recovery and the neurologic aspects, is because sometimes that gets forgotten about that neural connection, neurologic recovery. Because I'm always like train hard, recover harder. A lot of people don't. They overdo it. They get overtrained or whatever. So I definitely want to talk about that. But things like you mentioned, like we talked a little bit about like fasting. And I think you and Anthony talked about this briefly. Like I'd love to get your take on what you've done with some of your high level people to apply it to Gen Pop about how do you time your nutrition protocols? Like especially if you want to burn body fat, build some muscle, fasting, refeeding, different cycles, different supplements. I think you talked about, I'd love to hear about it. I didn't get to hear the whole thing, but yeah, man, take it anywhere. Go.
There's cool stuff. There's cool stuff with nutrition. So everyone will look at, actually, there's a couple of ways we look at it. Okay. So the whole theory of caloric cycling and all carbohydrate cycling, to me, it's energetic cycling, right? To me, it doesn't matter. First of all, you have to find what diet paradigm you respond best to. Everyone's biology is going to respond different. Some people will thrive on carnivore, other people thrive on keto, other high carbohydrate, other fruit, it'll just depend on your specific genetic predisposition, how you respond to your lifestyle. So number one, find the diet you respond best to. And then in some way you'll make it cyclical. But those are the basics, right? Once you have those down, whether it's carnivore, keto, high carb, whatever, then you bring in this undulating pattern. The reason why we want to have that undulation in calories is because systemic fatigue will always accumulate. That is just from work, from training, from everything. And the easiest way to pull down the excessive glucocorticoids to get released is extra calories. Generally come from carbohydrates, but really you can get away with any kind of higher, calorie meal, day, however you need to space it out. So if you look at just from that to pull down systemic fatigue, have a refeed once or twice per week. Or if you need more dopamine, more neurological recovery, that's where like the deflux comes in. So I call it a deflux if it's like a cheat meal refeed because you're looking forward to that meal. You're not just getting the calories, you're getting the dopaminergic flux. So if you need more neurological recovery, have your refeed be more of like a free meal type scenario. Doesn't matter about the composition. It has to be a food that you actually look forward to, right? Like for me, it's been sushi and I'll get like some fried rice. It's just amazing. Me and my wife have a little date. It's the whole process and experience. I tell people, do it with your wife, do it with your husband, do it with your kids, like make it a fun experience because the whole point is the flux dopamine. If you don't need that neurological recovery, then you go with just more glycogen, right? More glucose to store more intramuscular glycogen to drive more like myological muscular-based recovery. Or if you're in the ketogenic-based world, you could do like the massive fat reloads and things like that. You can flux in a bunch of different ways, but have those higher calories once or twice per week, pull down systemic fatigue, and also to modulate phosphate starving. So we're trying to use on those lower calorie days, we are actually starving the body of phosphate, so it kind of comes into like the longevity conversation, and then rapidly repleting it. That rapid repletion improves mitochondrial memory potential. And that's the whole thing that governs whether your mitochondria kill themselves off apoptotically, if that's a word, or if they overspin, hyperpolarize, and you start off a bunch of ROS. So that change in phosphate levels can also modulate mitochondrial potential. So now we go back to the whole undulation and things like that. To me, day to day, we're trying to focus on basics of nutrient timing. So if you're going to be having some kind of a physical workout, then it makes a lot of sense to have some nitrogen and carbohydrates around those periods, right? So peri-workout nutrition, intra-workout, the essential amino acids to blunt proteolysis, some additional carbohydrates to actually drive that plasma insulin level synthetic process. So you can be more anabolic and more anti-catabolic. Some creatine to actually drive ATP replenishment and some other things as well. Maybe some taurine for intracellular hydration. All the cool stuff, goodies, intra-workout. Post-workout, you mentioned about recovery. Just because you stop training doesn't mean you start recovering. So until you actually replete glycogen levels, you pull down acetyl group accumulation, you pull down ventilation, and pull down heart rate, you don't start recovering.
Right.
So post-workout, if you're not eating, and the numbers are 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes, like to me, don't rush to eat right away post-workout, but don't just wait just to wait, right? Like eat whenever you're hungry, which is generally about 30 minutes or so post-workout. But again, just because we stop training doesn't mean you start recovering. So if you're not having that post-workout meal, if you're staying sympathetic and you're going straight to work and you're rushing around, ventilation isn't coming down, heart rate's not coming down. And guess what? You don't start recovering until 4 hours later. Right. So that's where the post-workout nutrition really comes in big. So you kind of work it backwards from there then because, okay, throughout the rest of the day, you're pretty reliant on that PBO-based system. So why not have nitrogen and fats? Because that makes more sense because we're trying to keep glucose around when we need it. So that's if you're like a traditional, we'll say moderate, person who responds to a moderate diet. Like myself, I need protein, I need fats, I need carbs, I need everything. I'm also kind of an outlier because I just do so much a day. But if you're that person, that setup's perfect. If not, you still in like a carnivore or a ketogenic based setting, you can still get away with just intra-workout carbohydrates. Keeping carbohydrates under 50 grams or 75 grams or whatever you respond best to make sure you're still driving that performance, managing glucocorticoids, but you're getting back to that you respond best to for the rest of the day. So that's usually how I kind of set it up with nutrient timing, day-to-day changes based on how they respond best from a diet aspect, and then some kind of a refeed in there, assuming that they actually need that response and they can respond to it well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. You mentioned earlier talking about like if they need neurologic recovery, what are some ways you're following your athletes and your clients like to assess that? Like I'm sore, I'm just tired versus neurologic recovery. Is there something you look at or anything else you're gauging on symptoms or anything else?
A lot of feedback markers, a lot of metrics. So normally you can sense overtraining when blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up, whenever heart rate variability kind of gets skewed. You start seeing all these negative effects day to day. You see sleep start to tank. You see sleep scores start to go down. And you start to notice the brain fog. The lack of ability to pull from long-term and short-term memory goes down. So once you start seeing that person who's like they're up and ready to go, but they can't put a thought or a sentence together. That's usually that damaging of the central nervous system. And damaging is the wrong word. Let's say depletion of either acetylcholine or ketone bodies or glucose, something in the brain needs more recovery. Could be fueling wise. You could see like an actioning event phenomenon occurring. Generally doesn't happen for most people, but usually that's what you then do, start to approach it more from the neurological aspect. You go back to their goals too. If it's someone like you or I or someone like us who's in the, we'll say like the entrepreneurial world, we can never have enough neurological recovery. So you're looking at making sure your brain is metabolically flexible. We have metabolic flexibility, neurological flexibility, and mitochondrial flexibility. That middle one, the neurological flexibility, talks about how our brain can utilize ketone bodies, oxygen, acetylcholine, and glucose. 4 freaking fuel sources. How cool is that to fuel your brain? So
Right.
before we talked, I had ketone IQ because earlier today I had ketone aid. So for this moment in time, I know that I needed more ketone bodies. But this morning, I needed more of a driver on glucose. So I had more glucose, literally just from food. This is actually bananas, to make sure that I had that fueling on the neurological aspect. I generally tend to burn through acetylcholine pretty fast. So then in between those 2 feedings, I had some alpha GPC just to donate more raw acetylcholine. And then later on today, after my second workout of the day, I'll have super oxygenated water to supply more oxygen to the brain. So I can have a full work day, have 2 workouts, and still play with my kids after school and keep going hard until it's bedtime. So look at it from everyone likes to look at like metabolic flexibility, and then neurological was the same thing. We have a lot of neurological flexibility to look at.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome, man. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I'm kind of like you. I'm just kind of like, what am I gonna be doing today? And like I kind of fuel that way. And I try to like rotate things. Like some people, like you said, there's low carb all week. Like the classic is, low carb all week, carb up on weekends. But for me, I like to kind of rotate them throughout the day, depending, and try to fuel more during the day. But some people can't do that. They're not as metabolically flexible. And that's where the tweaking comes in. So speaking of that, so I have a lot of, men and women especially, and I don't know if there's, for you, from your perspective, differences between men and women, if they want to say like using fasting or using that cycling that you just talked about, like, do you have much variation there with men and women? I want to fast or I want to burn some fat quickly, or do you just rotate them in throughout like you were talking about? Do you tend to use fasting with men versus women, or anything different, I guess, in that regard?
So everything we talked about beforehand applies for men and women, just
Mhm.
depends on the person. But fasting is different. So there's been the theories out there that it's the liver sexuality, so the estrogenic environment of the liver compared to more of the androgen dominant in the male. But that doesn't hold up because we can see athletes that are utilizing HRT, sky high estrogen levels get more IGF conversion from exogenous growth hormone that technically have the liver sexuality of a female, but they're male, doesn't hold up. So there's something about female physiology, and it will depend on person to person, but most actual females respond better to a lower fast, whereas most males can handle a longer fast. Now, that could literally be a 12-hour fast, a 16-hour fast, a 24, 36. There's all these ways to do it. In general, for most people, I would prefer I see most people responding better to a 24-hour fast at the most, maybe more of a 16-hour fast. So we're not doing that frequently. Some people can get away with it. Comes back to the person, but usually between men and women, females tend to handle fasts a little less efficiently because they tend to push up more glucocorticoids. So as you kind of go down that muscular scale, though, as a female acquires more muscle tissue, more going from like the athletic world, those females are more treated like males because biologically they have more muscle tissue than a female should have at their natural state. And that's where, like, even though peptides and HRT technically will keep you at physiological levels, it's a completely different ballgame. So that shifts the conversation as well.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. That's perfect. Let's talk a little bit about mitochondria. It's some of our favorite topics, right? And I think there's been a lot of people talking more, and I definitely love your take, and I want to dig in this too and talked about like membrane potentials, energy flux, etc. But a lot of things people kind of forget about, and even sometimes in the past I forgot about, like healing the body. Like where do you start? Like with me, a lot of times I'm always trying to like lower someone comes in, they're usually inflamed, trying to quiet down that inflammation. Maybe they've got a gut issue or a chronic infection, fixing, because everybody's like, well, I want to lose weight, but I'm tired and I'm inflamed. And like, well, let's get the inflammation down and we'll work on that. Same thing with the cells. It's like, let's fix that cell membrane. I think, Anthony's talked about this before. I think you have as well, about fixing that cellular membrane, talk about phospholipids, plasmalogens, different things like that. Sometimes that's the first step. And I think it gets forgotten about. So what's your take on like, let's talk about mitochondrial health, and we talk about cell membranes and flux and wherever you want to start with, but I definitely want to hit those topics.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So I think
A
first of
lot.
all, actually, let's look at NT factor. It's one of my favorite supplements out there. It's a glycophospholipid replacement therapy. That's all it is. All that means is what your cell membranes are made up of. This is that product for that. So it's a little scooper. I have one scoop every night. You just kind of shoot. It doesn't taste like much. I used it really big in the oncology world, and then I realized, oh my God, everyone can benefit from having healthy cell membranes, especially in the society of let's put total cholesterol down to 55. We want it to be 200, 250, but you're replacing the structure of your cell membranes, right? Then we have the plasmalogen conversation, which you mentioned, which if you look at how structurally integral they are to our brain, cardiac, renal, hepatic tissue, I mean, the list goes on and on, and so many biological processes they're involved in. So just making sure our brain and our bodies function from an organ system standpoint that we want it to, we bring in plasmalogens. So now we have some structure there, maybe a little bit of spermidine to start to drive some autophagy, then stuff like urethane to drive more mitophagy, so recycling of either damaged mitochondria or damaged cells, getting the bad stuff out. Okay, we're repairing the cell membranes, we're repairing some mitochondrial membranes. We then actually, I really like the combination of a microdose of glutathione and vitamin C, ideally injectable, depending on how they respond. If you get more of a driver from it energetically, we put it in the morning, but ideally we put it before bed. If you have it before bed at like 125 milligrams of vitamin C to 100 milligrams of glutathione, even 250 vitamin C, depending on your formula, that'll drive down so much systemic inflammation that'll allow your lymphatic system at night to work properly. The lymphatic system is a system in your brain that bathes your brain with blood through the spinal fluid, clears all the proteins, plaques, and damaged proteins out of there. We want that. We want to be able to get into our deep sleep and our REM sleep properly. You're not going to do that if you have a high state of inflammation. So vitamin C and glutathione microdose, you could do that in a daily fashion or at least 5 days per week. I've been really seeing a lot of efficacy with that. That's been a really big driver for a lot of people because if we can drive more repair processes at night, you can start waking up feeling more refreshed, kind of ready to go. There's also the potential for like an epital in there because then, so if you look at telomeres, anyone out there that doesn't know, you have that parent strand, that new strand. It's that 3' overhang. As we age, it's getting smaller and smaller. We're trying to add length to that. The problem is if you add too much of a length, it can actually spill over. And this is what we talked about before we started recording with the reverse transcriptase and the actual RNA specific component. One of them you could technically overexpress, and technically one of them could then fuel senescent cells and cancer cell growth. So epitalin, when injected, has such a high chemical signaling threshold response that it can potentially, if you overdo it, can run into more senescent cell accumulation. Right. Whereas the oral epitalin, chemical signaling wise, you're stopped. You're at a threshold. You don't run into the same problem. You can still add length to that 3' overhang. You can do the vitamin C, glutathione, and epitalin before bed, and it tends to be the best of both worlds. Start pulling down inflammation. You can sleep better and start losing fat. So we usually look at doing something like that to repair cell membranes, to repair mitochondrial membranes, and then start pulling down inflammation. That's usually where I'd kind of start off with most people.
Nice. And I'm glad you mentioned the microdosing because I haven't done a ton of injectable glutathione, but I know some people have caught, even like Dr. C's in his book has talked about like doing too much, systemic glutathione because then that can actually backfire in terms of creating too many reactive oxygen species. So if you're doing a bigger dose, maybe just once or twice a week, or just doing like an oral Glynac or something like that, or microdosing. So that's a good strategy.
Yeah, with the glutathione, it's interesting. It's all about that stress adaptation response. And this goes back way back to Dr. Hans Selye, where it's just you create a stress, have an adaptation. It's that you have to have that. If you over adapt, you're never going to have a stress, and then you're never going to actually adapt. You have to have that stress adaptation response. But I always used to say the same thing about glutathione and vitamin C. I'm starting to change my tune a little bit because look at our society today. I don't know anyone that's over managing stress. So far, so that you blunt the adaptation response. Right. If you do it post-workout, big doses long enough, yeah, you can cause problems. But I'm starting to see better biological age scores, lower speeds of aging, better body composition, better performance changes by technically over managing inflammation. Because we're all exposed to so much, and we're like this community, everyone's doing it right, and we still have a lot of environmental pathogens, toxins, insults, and we're training hard. Yeah. Just the act of training hard, and then you have bills, and you have what's going on in the news and social media. All these things, like just looking at your Instagram, for example, people scrolling through, it pushes a huge dump of serotonin and dopamine and fluxes calcium ions to start slowly atrophying your brain because the following 24 hours, it depletes it. It pulls it away. Right. So you're high, you're low. So now you're also atrophying your brain with another neurological insult that's also causing back the inflammation. So now I'm kind of like, okay, don't go crazy with the glutathione and vitamin C, but I think microdose daily. I think that's why the whole microdosing what am I going to call that? Trend, right? The microdosing trend is catching on. And I think it's for good reason because we're just under so much every single day. And every drug has a non-genomic response, meaning right now, and a genomic response, meaning more epigenetically and long-term over time.
Right. Yeah, I love that. No, you're absolutely right. I talk about that a lot, how we live in such a toxic freaking world, and I'm seeing, as you are, people more and more inflamed, people stressed. I'm seeing people with hormonal disruption at a much younger age. It's just like,
Yep.
wow, so yeah, I agree. You can't de-stress enough, I think, for most people.
Right. So it'll be interesting. So we talked beforehand. I have kids that are 6, 4, 2, and then 8 weeks old. And they're already little biohackers. They're already like, I have them taking all the right supplements. Like we ground all the time. We get so much sun exposure. It'll be interesting to see how they trend on the hormonal curve. Because most males, I think, what is it now, like 25 years old? Most males in their 20s need to go on HRT, and most females in their 30s now generally need to go on HRT. The
Yeah,
numbers are something like that. And
it's
it'll be
pretty low.
interesting to see what happens with them because I'm already seeing them compared to their friends and their neurological development, their emotional development, everything's higher. Not like compared or anything. Of course, I'm a proud dad, so I'm going to compare for sure. My kids are the best, but it'll be cool to track that trend over time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I definitely want to get into the peptide space. I know most people love it when we talk about that, of course. But before I forget, I think you had touched on something before I wanted to pick your brain because people are always asking me about like, especially like during or after a fast or a diet before they refeed or just taking it in general. Like people asking about like metformin, berberine type stuff for longevity, for performance. Some people were like, well, it blunts your anabolic response and you don't perform as well. It's a mitochondrial toxin. The other camp are like, no, it helps longevity and you should take it. Obviously, clearly, if you have insulin resistance, PCOS, of course, there's a role. But if you're a healthy guy or girl, do you take it for longevity? Does it affect your performance? Do you just you take it off and on for, like I say, if you want to do a fast or cut some weight? What's your take on those two compounds or anything similar for that matter?
Yeah, so we'll go with metformin and berberine first. So anything that can hyperdrive AMPK through those specific cascades has the potential to deplete intramuscular glycogen and then drive down that neurological response to training. That's probably less than 5, maybe 10% of people. So those people that take it, they'll take one tablet of metformin and the next day or the next workout, they'll have no strength. I've
Yeah.
had elite level powerlifters take metformin, 500 milligram tablet, and they're squatting 700 pounds normally for reps. They couldn't put 405 up.
Wow.
That's less than 10% of people. That's less
Yeah.
than maybe even 5% of people. That's not the majority. If you
Right.
have metformin or berberine and the next workout you're fine, you're most likely never going to have that response. Certain people might take a week, but you'll drop like 10 pounds of glycogen. It's very noticeable. If you have to question it, then it's not affecting you. It's only going to benefit you. If we look at that AMPK whole cycle and cascade, it's not opposing forces in biology, right? AMPK has to happen in order to drive mTOR. It's a recycling process. All of biology is that recycling of energetics. So if we want to drive mTOR maximally, then drive AMPK maximally. So the berberines of the world could be amazing players during the day. You can layer and stack them on top of metformin at the bookends of the day. So you're driving GLUT4 translocation, LDLR receptor-based change with metformin mornings and nights, usually 500 milligrams at a minimum of each. We generally say that because you mentioned about the mitochondrial component.
Hmm.
Metformin will only lower mitochondrial memory potential at a lower dose. So it's either low doses or the very high doses of metformin that causes mitochondrial dysfunction. That's generally 500 milligrams or less or 2 grams or more. Right in that gram to 1.5 grams. Usually a gram is where most people sit, and then 1.5 grams where you need like more like cholesterol-based changes. But you're generally in that kind of range to not skew mitochondrial factors. And you can like test this out yourself, but don't take my word for it. Have this in play while you have other mitochondrial players in play, and you'll notice if you're overspinning or underspinning. If you underspin your mitochondria, that's going to cause more of the actual spontaneous kill of apoptosis of your mitochondria, and you'll notice you'll have less energy, right? If you start spinning off and having too much hyperpolarization, too much overspinning of the mitochondria, so too high a millivoltage, guess what? More ROS production, and you're going to feel inflamed and water. You're going to feel and look noticeably worse. So you can put it in and literally tell what's going on. If you don't notice any of those negative side effects, you're the 90 or 95% of people respond better to it. So to
Right.
me, I think they're amazing compounds, but there's no drug, supplement, training style, nutritional program that's going to fit everyone. So to me, it's know everything. So then if you take it, you see negative response, cool. That's not my drug. I go on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you take either one of those?
I do. I take a ton of berberine throughout the day. And then I actually do have to cycle metformin back and forth because mainly just because of my gut. So the
Yeah. Yeah.
shifts in the gut biota for how much food I have to eat now to be like 260, 265, it's kind of skewing my gut microbiome. But when I'm hypocaloric, I handle it better and it improves my gut microbiome. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
personally have to pull it in and out, but a lot of people just keep it in the background pretty much year round.
Yeah, yeah. Well, definitely, maybe after we talk about this, I definitely, the underspin, overspin. I want to talk about that for people like, what the hell is he talking about? It's funny
Yeah.
because I actually have someone I work with who was definitely your classic overspinner. She was taking like way too many things at once. Like multiple peptides, multiple mitochondrial peptides, and her heart rate was going up for HRV. And I'm like, I said, just stop everything, pull it back, and like, I am not even 5 days later. She's like, I feel great, back to normal. I'm like, there you go.
There you go. Do you want me to do
Kind of
that
like
now?
overtraining. It's like you can take too much stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want me to dig into that now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so first of all, I made those terms up again. I made those terms up because that's how I see it from a sub-quantum level side of things. So underspinning is the same thing. So in clinical terms, it's called hypopolarization.
Hmm.
All that means is a low mitochondrial memory potential.
Right.
I like the term underspinning because if you understand how ATPase spins, how all these molecules spin at a subquantum level, it's all rotational, vibrational, energetic, and frequency based. So I see it more from the quantum side of things, but it's all just the same word to describe the same thing. So
Yep.
if you underspin, hypopolarize, too low of mitochondrial memory potential, we'll say negative, less than a negative 150 millivolts, something like that. That's going to cause all the spontaneous killing of mitochondria. So that's the apoptotic side of things. They'll literally explode. If you overspin, it's hyperpolarization. Mitochondrial memory potential is too high, generally negative 200 millivolts plus, something like that, and it changes from person to person. That's going to cause the reactive oxygen species to spin off and cause more oxidation, more inflammation. So my terms of overspin, underspin are the same things as saying hypopolarization and hyperpolarization. So you're trying to find that sweet spot medium. The problem and why you and I and everyone else out there responds differently to all these different peptides and supplements is because we don't know what our baseline is at. Like I've had a lot of people testing from a mobile standpoint with some of the mitochondrial work I'm doing for some consulting groups I research with. And some people are tested, negative 70 millivolts. Other people are 250 millivolts. So we're trying to go through a process of, okay, SLU drives this much of a millivolt change generally, or SS31 changes millivolt changes roughly this much. We're trying to figure out so people have a better guideline. But that's why we go low and slow and do one thing at a time, because you can easily overspin or underspin. We're trying to figure that out.
Nice, nice. No, I agree with you. I'm a visual guy, so like when like you said, looking at the quantum, you've seen those electron microscopy photographs of the ATP, the whole thing it does. It just looks like a whole spinning, like something
Yeah,
out of a movie. I'm like, oh, I get it now. I can visualize that. So
right.
I like
It is.
I like your terms.
It's that Wizard of Oz tornado, and
Yes,
there's a
yes,
real life example too, right? You've
right,
seen that plank of wood through the side of a sidewalk or like a concrete building, and how is that wood? So in a tornado based setting, they show the effects after the storms, and you'll
right,
see objects that couldn't go fast enough to go through an actual concrete layer because it would just blow up, right? The
right,
wood would just explode. It's not technically strong enough, but it hits the right resonance, the right spin at a subquantum level, and it resonates at the same frequency that that wall is actually spinning at, resonating at. And it, for a temporary moment in time, it's all one. It phase
right,
changes. And
right,
then the tornado goes away and it's still there. Like
right.
that's a real world example of that same phenomenon we see of it looking like a big tornado. It's super cool.
Makes me think of like, again, I'm a superhero guy, but it makes me think of I don't know if you know, like the Flash, he like can
Oh yeah.
vibrate through walls and do like same thing. He's
Yep.
merging his frequencies. I'm like, see,
Yep.
there's something to
It's so funny how all those cartoons, because like I grew up watching Dragon Ball Z, and
Yeah,
like in the latest series, it was Ultra Instinct when he can just react autonomously. Like all of these things, all that is being able to connect your brain with your consciousness. Because then
right.
the brain talks to central nervous system, the cardiac tissue, which really governs everything. So you can literally react without thinking. I do it all the time. Where I talked about this on a podcast the other day. Like I was carrying, I have a fan right here, and the bottom can like pull off, but I always forget about it. So I picked it up and I'm walking, and I just had the gut instinct to move my foot to the left. Don't know why. Mid step, I just moved it, and the bottom fell off. And like that stuff
Right.
happened to me multiple times per day because you said that's the gut instinct, that's the gut
Mhm.
feeling. It's
Right.
all explained in the quantum world. It's
Yeah,
funny that all these superhero movies and comics, like they're talking about real phenomenon, which is kind of crazy to think about. It's trippy.
it is. It totally is. Like the more I learn about this, I think about all the concepts. I'm like, wow, I read that before. Like there's something
And
to
it shows you who's actually at that level from a consciousness aspect. So we talked about this before we aired, but this is the perfect segue, just naturally, right? So anyone I know that's making over $1 billion a year is doing everything from structured water to the subquantum work to meditation to grounding. They're doing all these things that were technically woo-woo 10 years ago.
right.
You can't get to that level of success without doing these things. And I'm correlating that with the comic books and all those big blockbuster movies because
Right.
the people behind it are writing this. They're at that level. They may not
Yeah.
be billionaires, but they're making millions and stuff like that. They got to that level and they put their thoughts into these actual movies. because it's reality. So they're just spinning reality in a way that's kind of, appeasing to the masses, which I love.
Right, right, absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, like we were talking about beforehand with, acupuncture and qigong and all these different ancient modalities. There's something to that. Even you talk about the Bible, and Jesus and people like
Yeah.
all these things were like, did they do that, or is it because they were so attuned to nature and their frequencies were aligned with the universe? Could they control it, master it? Who knows? So something to it.
Right. And
Yeah.
again, I think like two of the smartest people in history are probably Tesla and Klotsky. And if they were doing all this how long ago, and their technologies are still around, people are still trying to improve upon them, like I think that kind of says something.
Right. For sure. For sure. Well, let's I definitely let's to get into like some mitochondrial stuff. I love people learning more and more about this every day. So I definitely want to talk on. I know you've done some talks on this, and I've always kind of like, maybe I'll do that. And I never really played around with it much, but like things like simple stuff like oxytocin, L-carnitine, methylene blue, and then of course everybody wants to know more about the mitochondrial peptides, the SLUs, the SS31s, the MODS-C, which we've been talking about for a while. But I think SLOOP is the new kid on the block. But let's just start with the basics. Like think people like the underutilized players like L-carnitine and methylene blue, oxytocin, stuff like that. So
Let's start with oxytocin because I think that's one of the coolest ones.
yeah,
So
I agree.
if you're in the bodybuilding community, right, you're looking at the drug trenbolone. Trenbolone, one of the reasons why it's so hyperanabolic is because it'll drive up oxytocin levels
Yep.
to extreme extents, right?
Right.
What that does, because that's that androgen of choice if you're trying to recomp, is it's driving the biotransformation process of adipocyte, fat cell, using that stored energy to actually fuel myocyte to go to a new muscle cell. Oxytocin does that. So instead of having to take trenbolone, it doesn't do it to the same extent, obviously, but oxytocin is a couple steps below, but it still drives that recompositioning process. On top of you trying to improve in social adaptation scenarios that can improve with that, like social anxiety. I use it for people that give like big high tier speeches and things like that. They need the oxytocin flux. In the sexual dysfunctional world, it can also be used pretty massively to pair with a dopaminergic flux to drive up better orgasms for men and women. Cool things with oxytocin. We'll
Yep.
take a sidestep into carnitine. Man, carnitine does everything. I wrote the original ebook on it, I don't know, 10 years ago, like when I was first starting off, like 10, 13 years ago, something like that. And I still love it to this day. It is like the most basic energy fluxing molecule.
Yeah.
Because if we look in mitochondria, getting that fatty acid shuttled across via those carnitine transporters, getting it into the mitochondria is all carnitine based. Then the recycling process, it does it again, goes through the different membrane layers. But carnitine will not just drive beta oxidation, it won't just lose fat. You'll also improve how you handle glucose, how you handle ketone bodies, how you flux acetylcholine, because it'll clear acetyl groups from the brain. So post-workout, when you have that brain fog, if you have like a big strength workout or whatever, you build up acetyl groups and it'll actually cause insulin resistance in the brain and on certain muscle tissues. So you can utilize carnitine post-workout to clear those acetyl groups. You can use it before a big free meal, cheat meal, refeed meal, whatever, because it's going to improve nutrient partitioning in that acute setting. You can use it to potentiate your exogenous growth hormone. You can use it to potentiate your exogenous androgens. You can use it to basically do everything from a body recomposition aspect while driving up VO2 max and driving up energetics in every aspect from an energy system standpoint. So whether it's alactic dominant or glycolytic dominant, it's still going to be helping massively. So L-carnitine, and then you pair it with injectable choline. The choline then also drives fat metabolism. Also will donate more choline to the neuromuscular junction. You can fire those neurons harder. You can track muscles harder. So the carnitine choline preparations then come in massively. Then you really get crazy and you add in something like DADA, diisopropylamine dichloroacetate. What that does, if you look at glycolysis, so glucose down to pyruvate, pyruvate down to acetyl-CoA, pyruvate dehydrogenase kinase, that ends right in the middle, you could basically inhibit that and then allow as much pyruvate as you have to be converted to acetyl-CoA to convert to ATP. You're never going to run out of pyruvate. Like, I don't know if anyone's going to run out of pyruvate, right? So you can have literally endless energy. So that combination, I use that all the time actually in like the NHL, NFL, NBA, because they're all legal supplements. Carnitine, choline, and DADA, they're all legal. Nothing's banned. So you can utilize those and you can drive performance to the next level. And again, these are things that like professional athletes, the best of the best are using. So your gym goer, average guy, we can wear, like to me, everyone should be using, or at least they can. It's another tool.
Gotcha. Now, are you using the just for your average, not the pro, but your average gym goer fitness person? Are you doing the L-carnitine pre-workout, post-workout, both? Same with the choline, or
Generally, we're doing them pre-workout, unless if it's like a higher tier powerlifter, they're really pushing some heavy load, like an alactic phase of training. Then we do the carnitine post-workout. Then you can also layer it, so maybe your training days it's pre-workout, and then maybe on your rest days it's the first meal of the day to drive more energetic fluxing for the day. Because usually, if we're following this nutrient timing scenario, we're going to have more protein and fat meals in like a basic scenario. so we can improve how we use beta oxidation throughout the day, just using fat as fuel.
Gotcha. I love it. Yeah, I love that. And I just started playing around with L-carnitine because I kind of forgot about it for the longest time until I started hearing about it again. So just started playing around with that myself. Um,
I have a cool one too. So you can actually potentiate your exogenous growth hormone or any of your growth hormone peptides by adding carnitine into that same solution. So you only need about 50 milligrams of carnitine per vial if it's a 10 IU vial of exogenous growth hormone through your provider, or if it's a traditional 5 milligram vial of IPM, testosterone, anything like that. If you actually connect all the pathways, they are all interconnected and almost exactly the same, but through a different cascade. So so growth hormone, easy example, right? Growth hormone releases lipase, which will drive lipolysis. So if that's not in the bloodstream, what does carnitine do? Picks it up, puts it in the mitochondria. So they potentiate each other massively. So usually you can see like a 20 or 30% improvement and increase on your growth hormone or peptides just by adding a little bit of carnitine to it. But you have to reconstitute the peptide first and then put in the carnitine. Or else the solution doesn't mix and you get kind of clumpy. It looks cloudy. We don't want that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I've always kind of shied away with mixing peptides just because of the things that can happen. But but that's an amino acid I would imagine is very safe. Or you just do them together. Yeah, it makes sense. That's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah, it's such a small little thing. And again, 25% improvement. I'll take that any day.
Right. Absolutely. Same with oxytocin. I've used it a lot for like people with long haul COVID or just, fatigue or like you said, just mental mood issues, depression. But I kind of same thing, years ago, I heard about it as, recomp agent. And I heard the same data about, the anabolics, but I think it's more injectable, more for body comp, right? Versus nasal or both. I'm not sure. I've not done to use a ton of it in that way.
You generally get better spillover to like the body composition world and even the performance aspect when you inject it. Intranasal is more for like the sexual performance neurological side of things. It's interesting with oxytocin too, depending on where you're at in this journey. So if you do anything to improve your erectile growth, so either length or girth as a male, or if you're a female trying to improve clitoral sensitivity, you can become very sensitive to oxytocin. So like I just finished up a little protocol for myself and I added an inch to girth and length in like 6 weeks and had to stop because dynamically, me and my wife are perfect together and dimensions get a little too out of whack and it's no fun for anyone. And I can't take oxytocin out because it'll give me a spontaneous erection for like a good couple hours. So it's good. I only bring that up because then it's good to know for certain individuals that are bringing this in for that side of things that have like hyposexual disorders. You can bring in these kind of protocols for clitoral or erectile tissue, male or female, and then top that up with the oxytocin component intranasal, and that can fortify and improve orgasmic strength, potential, erectile quality, kind of everything.
That's interesting. People are going to ask me like, well, what's that protocol? Like, I don't know if you can feel comfortable sharing that, but I see that a lot, especially with women, but men too.
Oh yeah.
Lack of sensitivity or, of course, everybody wants to respond better, but what did you do or what's some things you've done with that?
Lots. So if let's look at the female one first of all. So there's a lot of different clitoral-based pumps where all you're trying to do is actually pump clitoral tissue. Whenever you hyperoxygenate an area, it pulls in more hemodynamics, so blood, oxygen, nutrients. If you pair that with a low dose of Cialis, 2.5 milligrams, something like that, nothing crazy, right? More blood is going to clitoral tissue. Now you have to improve the sensitivity aspect as well, which doesn't always happen. So this is where you can try and play with local applications of testosterone or estradiol, depending on if you're on HRT or not. Right. If you're not on HRT, then you could do something like a horny goat weed with, 10% icariin content, I believe. That'll drive even more dynamics to clitoral tissue or Siberian rhubarb to donate a little more estrogen. We're trying to do that locally if we could, or like a topical CBD. Topical CBD on vaginal tissue actually drives a lot of parasympathetic activity locally. If a clitoral vaginal tissue is basically parasympathetic, if we're in a low state of arousal, you can more easily put blood flow into that area. Because female erectile tissue, I mean, as you know this, but just for your viewers out there, if you compare a penis to actual clitoris and the actual bulbs, right? It's exactly the same. One's internal, one's external. There's different dimensions, right? But females take a good 15 to 20 minutes to get enough blood flow through the brain, down to the spinal cord, to the nipple and breast tissue, and then back down and then into the actual clitoral bulb and vaginal hood. Right. So generally, females respond very well to exogenous red light therapy or intravaginal red light therapy, and then intravaginal VIP, so vasointestinal peptide, that can drive a lot of vaginal lubrication. So then we kind of sidestep to the guys. That's who do a lot of manual work. So you do a lot of stretching work, you could do weighted work, pumping work. Usually the stretching work is more length-based because length is more of a, we'll say a collagen problem. Right. And then the girth is more of the vascular endothelial layer side of things. So then the pumping and the blood flow work comes in. Right. What does that sound like peptide-wise? GHKCU, right, for collagen. BPC-157 for angiogenesis. Those basic ones intrapenile injected are super easy. You go right into the side of the corpus cavernosa, right into those side sponge layers you rotate every other day. And doing a simple protocol like that can add a pretty drastic change to your erectile girth and length. Then you kind of get into if there's like sensitivity problems, but we'll get down a whole rabbit hole with that. But that's roughly like a synopsis for like female and males that have like hyposexual problems.
That's awesome. No, that's very good. Yeah. I used to, when I had a brick and mortar clinic, we did a lot of stuff with that. We did like, the shockwave therapy, PRP injections in the penis, and same with the women. They call it the O shot, the P shot, different things like that. Yep. So a lot of local tissue things.
Oh, exosome therapy too in the clitoral
Yeah.
tissue and the erectile tissue tends to work extremely well, especially if there's like a localized fibrosis. I've seen that. We have the actual MRI scans. So we've also done some functional MRIs too to see what happened in the brain whenever the penis or clitoral tissue, got a little bit of fibrosis. We usually don't see this in the female clitoral world. Usually that's just regression, which is more neurochemical. But within the male world, where there is actual fibrosis in erectile tissue, that's where those things like the localized exosomes, 10 billion can completely change the direction.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, exosomes are fantastic. There's so much going on in that world right now. Let's
right. Oh yeah, and there's some new proteins. I can't talk about them yet because I'm part of one of the research groups, but there's new. Again, it sounds like everyone's talking about this, but there's always new proteins. It's the next thing. It's going to be complementary, though. To me, it's going to be that one bag of your exosomes, your clothos, of these new proteins we're coming out with, and then exogenous mitochondria, and that's going to be like the lifesaver bag. And everyone goes once a quarter or whatever it ends up being.
Oh, that's cool. Very cool. Before I forget, I still want to talk some more about mitochondria, but it popped in my head. Like, I don't want to forget because I get asked about this all the time. I'd love to get your perspective on. Everybody's, of course, always wants to know about NAD, NMN, NMR. Sometimes I'll utilize like I hate to use this word, but like almost like the adaptogenic version, like 1-MNA with apigenin, kind of let it regulate. But I still find some utility in like subcutaneous NAD or just using NMN, NR. I know there's a million protocols out there, but give me for all the listeners out there who want to hear. While I plug in my computer, tell me a little bit about what you do with that.
So first of all, have you ever seen the movie Semi-Pro with Will Ferrell? It's an older movie.
Yes. Yeah.
So remember he had in his locker room ELE, everybody love everybody.
Oh yeah.
I feel like that to me in the whole NAD conversation, because NAD, NMN, NR, NA, they are also massively beneficial.
Yeah.
They say the charge on the NAD molecule, taken exogenously, taken into the cell, which is true, but it breaks down the precursors. It gets in there anyway. Because you have to go through that breakdown process to get into the cell intracellularly, you have different end fates. Whereas if you take a straight precursor like the NMN, NRs, NAs, so you're taking the same end fate, but getting through a different biochemical cascade. So to me, they all have their place and purpose. I'm a big fan of taking the over-the-counter supplements more daily as kind of a background longevity tool, as long as you're managing CD38 and that nicotinamide N-methyltransferase enzyme. And then the NAD therapy injected like a once or twice weekly therapy because it's so much stronger and more robust. You get that. It's not that tachycardia response, but you feel that like anxiety, that chest heaviness, right? Yeah. So in this scenario, if you have the JBSNF 000088 or 5-amino-1-MQ to manage NNMT or quercetin or Japonicus flora or parsley extract, all these things to manage NNMT and CD38, then because you have NA, right, through NMN, to NAD. It'll recycle back. If NMNT is too high over here, it's going to push all those NAD molecules that you're taking. It's just going to fuel senescent cell growth and cancer cell growth. Not so much cancer, but more so the senescent side. And then anything you see over here can be downregulated. So if you block that enzyme, block CD30 as well, then you push all the NAD back. And then that starts to push the storage of intramuscular glycogen. That starts to drive the sirtuin cascade. It starts to drive the improvement to mitochondrial memory potential. It improves all the health aspects. So to me, manage NNMT, manage CD38, and then take it all. Don't go crazy and boatload it, but maybe 5 days per week, you have your over-the-counter NMNs, NRs, NAs, and then maybe on Saturday and Sunday, or whatever your off days are, that's your NAD therapies to drive more of the recovery aspect. So to me, I think they all have their place and purpose. I'm a big fan of all of them, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. I like to rotate strategies too. And same with the peptide. I like to rotate things out. I know for a while there, I was reading, I think just kind of like fasting. A lot of people like overdo it, right? They're doing the NAD like multiple, a ton. And then I'm like, well, you got to be careful because if you're inflamed or you have a lot of senescent cells, you're actually feeding them, and that's not a good thing. So you got to get that under control first, and then go back to the infusions or the injections or whatever. So yeah, I agree with you. I think they all have a place for sure.
And you can even use like intranasal NAD or like low doses of subcutaneous or IM NAD to drive lactate dehydrogenase and a couple different other different glycolytic enzymes as well to drive up glycolysis. So you can take it pre-workout to actually drive your performance during the workout. So you can use it For health, you can use it for neurological recovery. You can use it for organ health. Like there's a ton of applications there.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Are you using like with a lot of your, especially your high performers, your athletes and stuff, or even just Gen Pop, I guess now that I think about it, but like any like senolytic protocols, any rotational strategy, like where you're building performance, and we're going to take time off. We're going to like kill the bad shit, right? And sorry to, and then just heal the body, anything like that?
Yes, but I look at it from a different perspective. So I'll put it into two camps. We're looking at chemical signaling potential. So if it's an exogenous like FOXO4 DRI or azithromycin, that is so chemically strong. You can over-clear senescent cells. And again, senescent cells aren't bad. They cause adaptation, positive response. It's too much or too little. So we want mid-range. So if you're using a FOXO4 or azithromycin or anything that chemically strong, that's an infrequent player. If you have the ficetins, spermidines, uroethanase, go down the list of different senolytic agents, mitophagy players, those are over the counter. Those are pretty capped on the chemical signaling threshold. So you can't go more than physiological limits. Right. Those can be taken daily. So generally, I'd say you're doing those as daily players. And then as you have an overaccumulation of senescent cells, maybe during a deload week, that's when you push the bigger players. And then you have things like JSN, BF, 5-MeO-1-MQ, which are kind of in the middle because they're indirectly driving clearance of senescent cells via NAD, intertwined cascades. So those are also, okay, where's everything else as a whole, paradigm? And that's where the whole layering things on can become a little complicated. If you have too much, you're just like we overspin or underspin mitochondria, you're overclearing or underclearing senescent cells. So you generally make it easy, over the counter, daily, more of an injectable peptide, higher medication, chemical signaling potential, infrequent.
Gotcha. Love it. Love it. I agree. Perfect. Yeah. So in terms of like, we were talking a little bit earlier about some of the mitochondrial peptides, of course, everybody wants to talk, about some of the newer players. I mean, MOTS-C's been around for a bit, SS31, I love. But like Sloop, BAM, definitely the Sloop, I think people are talking about. I know you just did a big podcast about this, but anything you want to say about any of the mitochondrial peptides, and we'll
Yeah, I want to hit SLU real quick. So SLU PP332. Started using that years and years ago. No one cared about it. No one wanted to make it or produce it. So it was so hard for my client base to do it. So we'd have to get the cast number, manufacture it. We collect so much data though. And so across the spectrum of demographics, I see that right now as being one of the better mitochondrial peptides because not only does it drive improvements to beta oxidation so you lose more fat, we see it repairing ocular health. We see it repairing erectile tissue if there's a fibrosis scenario. We see it driving intramuscular glycogen deposition. But what's even cooler than all that is how it repairs the mitochondria. So how it acts with the peroxisome proliferated active receptor gamma coactivator 1 alpha, it's that 1 alpha and the 1 beta. It'll indirectly and directly drive NRF1 and 2. What those do, because everyone knows that, right? NRF1 and F2 drives the mitochondria to literally produce its own antioxidants. Right. So it's literally cleaning up its own mess from overspinning and creating too much ROS.
Right.
So SLU is like, to me right now, the all-in-one best mitochondrial player. The problem is, though, again, it's chemically strong. So sometimes 100 micrograms is too much for people and they can't handle it. If that's you, that drug's just not for you. Other people can handle upwards of 500 micrograms, a milligram. Like the dosage rates can depend on the person. I used to be able to handle 500 or 750 micrograms. I can't handle more than 250 now, which you could debate. Maybe that's because my mitochondria are healthier now or more sensitive. Don't really know, but you'll know that your response will change over time. So if you're trying to like get into mitochondrial peptides, I'd probably say wait on the Sloop. I'd say save that. Get used to the easier lower tier chemical players like a MOTS-C. So MOTS-C is working at the mitochondrial DNA. So mitochondrial open reading frame of 12S RNA-C drives a little bit of everything. It'll drive up AMPK, it'll drive up sirtuins, it'll drive up indirectly beta oxidation. It does a little bit of everything, but it generally doesn't do it that strong, which is cool because you get some healing, some improvement to performance and body composition, but you're not overspending. And usually people aren't having a millivoltage problem from taking too much MOTS-C. So usually MOTS-C is like the easy introductory player, and then SS31 is the healing agent because that's helping electrons and how they skip across the electron transport chain. It's cardiolipid and actually does a lot of other things as well, but that's mainly how people look at it being used.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. And there's a million protocols out there, right? People could take it, daily and then recover on the weekends or just do it on your heavy training days and your off days, not do it. I know there's a million ways to do it, but do you have your preference? And again, it depends on the person, right? It depends on their lifestyle and everything else they're doing. So what do you, any preferences?
So if someone's just getting into it, I would do MOTS-C daily. MOTS-C daily, 4 to 8 weeks, arbitrarily, no reason for that time frame. See how you respond, right? Start off at 300 to 500 micrograms upon waking if it's a rest day or pre-workout if it's on a training day. So we can pair a little bit more energetics in the resting parasympathetic beta oxidation scenario. and then more in the glycogen lactic training energetic environment, right? After that period of time, a month or two, then rotate. Do SS31 between 1 to 5 milligrams daily first thing upon waking. Same thing 4 to 8 weeks. See how you respond. Then after that, same kind of rinse, wash, and repeat, but do it with SL. You start with 100 micrograms, and every other week, if you can handle it, increase it by 100 micrograms. At the end of that entire time frame, what would that be? 6 months? Look back at your notes. What did you respond best to? What gave you the most health? What gave you the most improvements to performance? What gave you those body composition changes? Then you can make your notes. Because like for me, 1 milligram of MOTC works the same as 50 milligrams of MOTC for me. I don't get that much out of it, but 1 milligram is perfect. So I know that that's a low dose protocol for me. SLU, I respond amazingly well to, but if I take too much, I can't handle it, number one, and I lose too much body weight too fast, number two. SS31, that's one almost everyone can take to extraordinary levels. It's more based on finances and just get more healing and recovery. But if your health's in a pretty good position, you don't need as much pressure there. So maybe then you kind of go and flip the script, and maybe we do go with a 5-amino 1MQ, where we do go with a JSBNF or JBSNF. I always screw those up, to push indirect NAD cascades to push mitochondrial potential. And this is all not talking about the HRT conversation, which also drives up the village potential of your mitochondria. And growth hormone peptides, for example, and exogenous growth hormone in itself, they will all drive biogenesis of mitochondria, repair of mitochondria. Everything you can imagine that's good for mitochondrial health comes from that somatropic family. That's why like low-dose growth hormone peptides are big in the longevity community, mainly because it's fixing mitochondria.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, I've been a big fan of the growth hormone peptides for years, and like you said, it's and I love the fact that you mentioned like more. I hate that term microdose, but smaller doses of like MOTC because back in the day, the classic thing was the 5 milligrams twice a week or even 10 milligram big, but it's like a whole vial sometimes. It could be pretty expensive.
Oh yeah.
You know?
And that's the thing too. Like you can apply these things daily and frequently. It more depends on what you're trying to get out of it as a whole. Usually though, if you look at mitochondria, we're trying to overspin those puppies every single day. Like not overspin it, get a little more action out of it because most of us have pretty worn out mitochondria. So in some way you can think of it this way, take one thing for your mitochondria every day.
Yeah.
If it's like a low tier day, do a bunch of vitamin C and glutathione. That's going to improve the mitochondrial biogenic and fusion fission process. If it's a big day, maybe you do push SLU because it's a big training day. If it's a big work day, maybe you need more of the neurological recovery. So you make more of an SS31 nasal spray and get more of the mitochondrial action specifically in neural tissue. So you could literally I have people do that, rotate it based on the day. So I have protocols set up. So it's like, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do that. And they'll wake up their day, and based on what that day is, they'll use that compound for the day. So it's not like this one protocol to fit all. I have over 457 pages on different protocols I've done over the years. And then you'll search and find it. You'll copy, paste. You'll go, okay, this person's a little bit different. So I changed this time in this dose. But you have so many different options. So I tell people there's no rules. Like we know rough general guidelines, but we're trying to make it that N of one, what works for you.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I'm glad you mentioned the 5-amino. It's kind of been hit or miss for me, but what's your take on using that, like sprinkling that into some of these protocols? Are you rotating that in? Are you adding any combination of some of these? What's been your success rate with that? I know some people love it. Some people feel nothing, so.
Generally, 5-amino 1MQ as an oral preparation, like 100 or so milligrams or 50 milligrams a couple times a day. I see that as being more of the longevity player. Yeah, it's managing that nicotinoid and methyltransferase, but I see that being more of the organ health replenishment of that NAD cycle, right? Whereas if you're trying to get more of the beta oxidative and fat loss changes, although the oral could work, the injectable preparation works better. A couple hundred micrograms tends to be more than enough. I've had some people need milligrams, so it does depend on where your mitochondria are at. But usually injectable preparation if you need more body comp performance changes, or if you're trying to just like background longevity aid.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I love it. I got to start winding down here in a couple minutes, but tell me some non-medical stuff. But like anything, I know we both talked about this off screen. But any one thing that you've learned, or anything you've changed your tune on over the last few years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, anything you've I believe this. Oh, that's wrong. Let's do this. Anything you've changed or learned something new about?
I'm going to bring up what we talked about before we started recording because it still doesn't make any sense to me on paper, but I've seen it play out and I can explain it now, but I still don't know why. So we know that if you overdrive that 3' overhang on telomeres, so too much telomerase in a higher chemical threshold like an epitalon injected, we can fuel cancer cells, okay? We're looking mainly at that reverse transcriptase and that RNA component of the telomerase enzyme, okay? If you look at it's TERC and TERT, so TERC, TERT, those are the two different ones there. They're both technically involved in every single aspect of telomerase action, meaning helping to improve telomerase enzymatic activity to give you more of that 3' overhang. But you can also technically fuel cancer cells with that actual reverse transcriptase. But if you do your research and dig deeper, that reverse transcriptase doesn't, because it's basically highly expressed in cancer cells, not so much in any other cell. But then you see the other cells it is expressed in, it's only driving healthy actions. It's cross-stimulating SIR2 and 1 and 3. It's driving NRF1 and 2. It's pulling down HSCRPs, interleukin 6s, like it's having indirect positive effects on the body. Like we see this, it's documented. And yet it doesn't make sense to me that it can drive, I mean, this is good, goes back to biology, where you were looking at things that are far end spectrums. If it's too little or too much, you have problems. So to me, it's more the balancing act between TERT and TERK that'll basically dictate whether that 3' overhang spills over into senescent cell or cancer cell accumulation or not. Now, the problem with that, and that's where like injectable epitalin, the original studies, which everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people interpreted wrong, or they translated it wrong, because they were doing what, like 10 milligrams a day, like they were doing really high dose protocols. It was done in micrograms. Right. So those original studies technically were interpreted wrong. So in terms of injecting epitalin, I would rather do it maybe once a quarter or once or twice a year, and do maybe a milligram daily for 10 days or something like that. We're not going crazy high on the dose because of that chemical signaling threshold potential. Because if you're overdriving TERK or TERT, they can potentially then fuel cancer cell growth. Whereas oral epitalin doesn't have that same chemical potential. So now I'm taking this with what I've done in the cancer community and trying to see, okay, can we reverse the script and start to actually kill off the telomerase within cancer cells and kill off the actual interaction between telomere length and tumor growth? And it's a lot of cool things, because then you also pair that to the longevity community and then kind of go, okay, do the opposite of that, because we're not having tumors, so how can we use this effectively for us? So this is one of the things where not so much I changed my tune on, but you just learn some new things and you go, okay, there has to be a change to my protocols. How can I make this better for humanity? And I still don't know. So I'm still figuring that out. That's like the latest thing for me.
That's cool. Well, that kind of answered my next question. I was going to say, I got two more quick questions. Like, what are you working on this year? Like, what's any big projects, anything else? I mean, that's one right there. That's a big one, but anything else you're working on, and what's coming up with your website? Anything, any big projects, things you're working on?
A lot. So there's two potential deals, one the NFL and NHL right now, but there's also pretty big interest from some other teams. So I'm trying to navigate that, because the people I'm talking with now I really like, and I'd rather have that go through. But it's also kind of like, if I have all these opportunities, I also don't want to miss one. So right. That's interesting, but that'll be super, super cool, because I'll be working with entire teams in a consulting fashion, whereas up to this point, I've done a ton of one-offs. Like I have players across the NFL, NHL, NBA, but working with a full team, that'd be cool. So that's a really big one that I'm trying to lock down. I do have potential to work more full-time with a zoo and with an actual oncology clinic. So in the oncology world, I'm trying to bring the peptide community into additional therapies they can layer in with their chemotherapy and the radiations. So again, not going against big pharma, still do your chemo radiation. Don't want to get whacked, but also put these peptides in there so you only have to do 6 sessions versus 25 or whatever arbitrary number. Then the zoo community, I've worked a while in the background with a lot of the zoo vets. We're trying to do with one of the specific zoos, big zoo in the US. We're trying to have enough case studies, because the zoo vets didn't tell their supervisors about this. Because obviously peptides aren't accepted in the animal community. Yet we've reversed the healing for hyenas, lions, bears. I just did some work with a zebra shark, where he had an immune-based problem, and their thymus glands are different, so you can push thymic peptides harder. We're trying to have like 100 case studies and then go, okay, here's all the case studies. You didn't know this was happening, but we saved you $30 million in having to do these other medications for these actual animals. Hire Alex to be on full time. Like I would like to do that work full time with the zoo. So there's a lot of cool stuff there. Then I have my members group on School. So it's school.com/TPC Army. That's been blowing up. We're starting to get into like the monthly actual live Q&As. I post a ton of videos, tons of protocols and stuff like that over there. That's been really fun. Then my coaching in the background, that's been blowing up forever now. And I just find a way to keep managing it and just enjoying life. Then I have consulting work in the mitochondrial with exogenous mitochondria in mitochondrial transplantation. And I've talked about that a lot. I think you've heard about that, so I won't belabor on there. But got some cool stuff going on.
You got a lot going on, man. You're like a one-man army. I love it.
And I refuse to use AI. I love AI. It has a tool, a place, and a purpose. I don't like how it's atrophying brains and how a lot of people are using it to do less work or to not think. again, AI is amazing, but my wife just told me a stat this morning about they're starting to come out with a lot of the MRI studies of the brain's atrophying clear across the spectrum. People that used AI for 6 months total, and it's crazy. So I just want to tell people out there again, everything has its place and purpose. AI is amazing; it's a great tool. Don't let it replace your thinking. It's just like reading a study and reading the result. That doesn't matter. You care about the methods. You care about how you got to that result.
I'm glad to hear you say it because I'm always talking to people, especially my kids, about like, as you see, when I'm out in public, it drives me nuts. Everybody's on their phone, everybody's texting. It's like nobody like writes anymore. Nobody like communicates face to face. And like I think we're dumb. We're dumb. Like when I read like the Daily Stoic, I read about these ancient philosophers. I'm like, they were so much smarter than we are today. And the
Yeah.
way they wrote and the things they thought about, I'm like, holy crap. I'm with you. I mean, I've used the AI, I use it often, but I like to just write and I still like journal. I like to like write cursive. I like to like write my journal. I like to read physical books, because I feel like we're losing out. And I'm worried about the
Yeah.
kids, our generations in ahead. Like what, they can't even talk. They have to like what
Right?
or text,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Let's blend it. Let's still use AI to further humanity, but you can't be losing basic communication, writing, and critical thinking skills. I think that's the problem. It's, as you know, it's black or white in today's society. And I'm
yeah,
like the biggest gray area person out there. Like again, ELE, just like Will Ferrell said, everybody love everybody. It's the same thing. It's that mid road. Things don't have to be black and white.
exactly. Speaking of books, do you I don't know how much you read any non-medical, non-scientific books you read or you're reading right now, or
Not really, not as of late. I keep rereading Power and Force from Hawkins. I just read that so many times. I just keep picking up on new nuggets. And then I'll read, where are my, I got a ton of books back there.
yeah,
I usually pick up like a random book. Someone will mention something, so I'll pick it up and read it. I'm trying to learn a little bit of new things as well. So more like synaptic pruning wise to stop that from happening. So I can keep expanding my brain and my actual memory base. So I'll read a book on like, how to change a tire, or I'll read a manual on how to do this, that, or that, just to learn something new, drive more glial cell line, drive neurotrophic factor to keep a lot of my brain to expand. That's usually a big thing that you can also learn a new skill. Like I have a Rubik's Cube somewhere behind me, and I solved it for the first time the other day. But since then, I can solve all of it up until that third layer, and there's a couple pieces wrong. And
right.
it's such a hard skill to master, but doing that allows you to continuously expand your brain. It's learning a new skill,
Right.
reading and an actual like physical movement.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Well, give out. I know you plugged it already, but feel free to plug your website, socials, anything else you want to say, or tell people where to find you.
ThePrepcoach.com. Member site is school.com/TPC Army. That's it.
That's awesome, man. I love it. Yeah, we may have to do a part two. Like we could talk for hours, but unfortunately, I got to cut it off. I got to run for another call. But man, Alex, thank you so much. You are wise beyond your years. You're a fountain of information. So I'm sure my readers and listeners will get a lot of. So thank you so much for coming on, man. Anything else you want to say?
Just thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. It means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, man, absolutely. All right, guys, Alex, check him out. Check out his website, and we will talk to you all soon.